You know, Jerry was just talking about the market. Well, here's the thing. The mainstream media plays the game of political gotcha, and of course they painted this administration as spiraling out of control, and it conveniently leaves out or forgets to report the much brighter economic news that is on Main Street these days. Today, of course, we learned that homebuilder confidence remains very strong. It's paced by a continued uptick in buyer traffic. In fact, the first time this happened in December was the first time it happened in more than a decade and expanded. And it turns out those folks are doing a lot more than just kicking the tires. First quarter data compiled by the Census Bureau saying a staggering 854,000 first-time home buyers versus 365,000 first-time renters. You know, that is a margin of more than 2 to 1 in the first time that buyers have outpaced renters since the third quarter of 2006. Something is happening. As for the fourth quarter of 2014, well, we saw corporate profits climb to a then record $1.7 trillion. And then you can see from that chart, spiraling into a free fall, finally crumbling to less than $1.4 trillion a year later. However, right now, with 90% of companies having already reported their first quarter profits are on pace, get this, for new all-time records. The earnings season wrapping up almost last week. It's been better than advertised. So far, 91 companies have reported. 64% beat on revenue, 75% on earnings, 13.6% blended earnings growth, the best since 2011. 9 out of 11 sectors have seen faster rates of growth since March of 2031. This economy is firing on all cylinders. Now, there's no doubt if this was happening under President Obama, it would be headline news, but even Republicans are downplaying the Trump economy, maybe because they want to continue to put pressure to get the rest of his agenda through. Joining me now to discuss, Shelby Holliday, Veronica Dagher, and Ford O'Connor. Ladies, let me start with you. Veronica, it's been a long time. This is not, I'm shocked that this is not more news. This is really incredible stuff. I mean, they talk about so-called soft data, but we're seeing hardcore data that shows this economy is really starting to get in gear.
That's right. This data shows people are feeling confident, especially the millennials. Those account for some of the first-time home buyers in this equation. People are feeling more secure about their jobs. Some of them are seeing wage growth, not as much as we'd like to see. But this shows people who are younger especially are feeling more confident. They're getting out of their parents' basements and taking the plunge, buying that first-time home. That's really good news for some home building stocks.
Shelby, immediately after the election, we saw a variety of sentiment numbers go through the roof, whether it was home builders, whether it was small businesses, whether it was just general consumer sentiment. It is beginning to manifest itself into something that it really tells me that Main Street America probably ignoring the media, because there's no way people are going out and buying homes, switching jobs, if they were listening to all the noise that comes from the media.
Right. If they thought it was all doom and gloom, they would be terrified right now. Instead, we're seeing consumers really confident, but we're also seeing them spend money. And it's not necessarily at retailers. Retailers are having a terrible quarter, but they're spending money elsewhere, as Veronica mentioned, homes, the big-ticket items. I also think it's important to look at the discrepancy between Main Street and Wall Street, because you have all these people on Wall Street saying, if Donald Trump doesn't capitalize on this sentiment, we could see it fall. But for now, people are hanging on. It's a bit of a, right, I'll believe it when I see it market, but the consumer's confident. That has not changed. I'm
seeing it, though, Ford, and I look at it every single day. And I will say I think Shelby's on to a key critical point here. Not only is the mainstream media downplaying this, but so are Republicans. I interview Republican after Republican, and I talk about the economy, and they kind of try to downplay it, just like Wilbur Ross last week, saying we're not even going to reach 3% growth this year. Is that some sort of calculated move to keep the fire going, to push the agenda forward? Because I think it might be a mistake.
Well, I think it is absolutely a mistake, Charles. I also take your point that basically if this was President Obama and these numbers were coming out, the media would be singing hallelujah, but because it's Donald Trump, it's meh. But I will say this. I think that the folks in Congress in particular, not just the White House, don't want to take their foot off the gas. They want to make sure they get that tax reform through, because what the White House at least knows is that President Trump's time in office solely hinges on the economy. And if this economy and this momentum continues to the next 4 years, he's going to be reelected. So he wants to undersell and overdeliver, if you will, Charles. I think folks in Congress are very concerned, frankly, about their 2018 midterm chances.
I also think you got to add, President Trump's getting quite a bit of help from abroad. Maybe Macron wasn't his favorite candidate in France, but him winning and the European Union staying together has a lot of people confident about Europe, which obviously affects American markets. And he is
That's
getting
on the
the
market
boost from
side.
abroad.
That is,
yes.
yeah. But on this side, though, with people now starting to quit their jobs, with people starting to buy homes instead of renting, that's a signal of long-term confidence that really can't even be captured by these surveys. But to Ford's point, I never thought of President Trump as someone who underpromises.
Right. You usually don't associate that with him. However, maybe in this case, maybe there's some strategy behind it, though. But I think the point is we do need to see more. We do need to see tax reform. We do need to see more regulatory reform.
Is it critical that it happens this year? Because, it had to happen in the first quarter. I mean, the first 100 days. That didn't happen. I think these artificial timelines don't necessarily matter if people believe it's going to happen, Veronica.
Well, that's a really good point. However, there is midterm elections to contend with next year, and so the political will to get things done lessens as time goes on. And I think a lot of folks really want to see these changes and are doubtful the later the year goes, they may not happen.
Hey, the window's closing, but tax reform happening at the beginning of 2018 is not a bad thing.
But let's remember this. The Democrats are not going to pass tax reform no matter what. This can only get done through budget reconciliation, which means a simple majority of Congress. And basically, the Republicans only have 2 bites at the apple. They have to get health care through before September 30th, or else they lose that ability to use budget reconciliation on that. And then they have to pick tax reform before the 2018 midterm. So they can get 2 major items through. That's what they should be focused on. And if they do that, the economy will keep booming.
Okay, so Ford, I'm watching this show, and I hear what you're saying as a GOP strategist, but a buddy of mine just got a job. The real unemployment rate has gone from double digits to about 8.5% right now. That has room to go much lower. If the economy is better, though, again, do you risk shooting yourself in the foot if you don't get all of the agenda through or even big parts of it, even though the reaction to President Trump being in the White House is already having a positive, self-fulfilling effect?
It is having a positive effect, Charles, but you have to understand, when we look at these numbers, typically when it trickles down to Main Street, it usually takes 9 months to a year. So pushing these items through over and over and making sure you get the agenda through is only going to further prime the pump, as President Trump likes to say. So I think you got to keep going and don't shoot yourself in the foot, and make sure that you're always rolling out positive news, because if you do that, the voters will believe in you.
What are you thinking here?
I think you also need to be careful what you say in the agenda and what your final tax plan is. For example, we were talking about housing before. Part of his tax plan right now is to limit the amount of deductions. One of those deductions he's thinking about limiting is limiting the state and local income tax deduction. Well, if he does that, the housing market could take a real hit in places like California and New York and discourage first-time buyers.